It was once known as the Coy's Historic Festival. Then it was the Silverstone Classic. Now it's simply the Classic Silverstone. Whatever you want to call it, it's a fantastic weekend of historic motor racing. And we're here for the day. The Classic was held on the August bank holiday, which is about a month later than the usual end of July date. Although a bank holiday, there was no racing on the Monday, it was just qualifying on Friday and racing on Saturday and Sunday. The event's been going for over 30 years, and I'm sure I've probably been to most of those. These photos were taken back in 1997 when my father was racing the HWM Grand Prix car with the HGPCA, so it's always been a must-do event for me. The crowds were probably not as large as usual, and that may have been due to ticket prices. I've actually been told that the cheapest way to attend the Classic is to become a member of a car club and buy the tickets through that club. And as you can see, the vast Silverstone infield is made up of largely car club displays. Here it's the Austin Healey Club with a lovely Sebring Sprite on display. Here's a Morris J-Type van from 1949. I always find these old commercial vehicles very charming with their period sign writing on the side. Rather sparse interior, but ideal for the Goodwood Paddock. And here is its modern version, and as it says on the side, it's 100% electric. This year, the Classic had a whole area dedicated to electric-powered vehicles. Even these bikes, which look fantastic. I guess the battery is in that sort of satchel underneath the crossbar. And you could test drive the electric cars and ride the electric bikes in a cordoned-off area. The Aston Martin Owners Club was out in force, and this car really caught my eye. I hadn't seen it before. It's a 1930 Aston Martin International, a short chassis version, and this body was made by Bertelli. It's a bespoke body, and it was made for a wealthy shipping magnate from Whitby called Mr. Headlam, and it really is something special. The 750 Motor Club was celebrating the centenary of the Austin 7, and it had on display several variants of the competition models. We used to run an Austin 7 single-seater just like this one, and it was my introduction to historic motoring, but they are really pretty things. By the time we arrived, the historic touring cars race was underway. This is split into classes, and it spans sort of 40 years of development of saloon car racing. So that goes from the older cars of the 60s era, the Cortinas and the Minis, right up to the fearsome Nissan Skylines of the late 90s. Andy Middlehurst won the race in one of those Nissan Skylines. 12.387, his fastest lap. Wandering around the paddock, you come across so many interesting vehicles. This lovely 4.5 litre low chassis Invicta. I've always loved the Invictas. I think they look quite sporty because they are so low in comparison to the Bentleys. And there's another appeal in that Noel Macklin, Lance Macklin's father, started Invicta, And Lance Macklin was the driver of our HWM in period. So always like to have a look at an Invicta, and quite rare to see now. Car number 21 is a really interesting car. It's the Aston Martin Red Dragon, even though it's green. Unfortunately, it's just going out of shot now, but it was the ultimate Aston Martin Ulster. It was designed for pre-war British racer Richard Seaman to beat the BMW 328s of Germany. This is a particular favourite of mine. It's Steve Skipworth's 1938 Aston Martin Speed model. It's just under 2 litres. Next to it is number 17, which is the same model but the 1936 version. Next to the Astons is this collection of Bentleys. I think at least 2 of those belong to the Morley family, who have a great heritage of racing Bentleys. Motor racing legends BRDC 500 pre-war sports car race got underway, and it was a half-hour race, and it was also just a fantastic display of Bentleys, Talbots, Astons and Rileys. Number 78 there, just going past, is interesting as that has twin rear wheels. It's John Burton's SS100 Jaguar, and the twin rear wheels were usually used for hill climbing to give it extra traction and not actually used for circuit racing, but it certainly catches the eye with those twin rear wheels. The Bentley of number 12 there, that's Hugh Apthorpe's Bentley. It's a famous car. It was owned in the 30s by Brooklands racer Forrest Lysett. Funny enough, there's a story about him that he left his desk in the city, drove to Brooklands at around lunchtime, broke one of the speed records there, then drove back and was back at his desk in the city for the rest of the afternoon. So how times have changed. Unusually, Gregor Fiskin was sharing the drive of Patrick Blakeney-Edwards in a Fraser Nash in the pre-war race, and they brought that Fraser Nash in first. This is Michael Birch in the sweet-sounding Talbot AV105. He put the car into a spin at the first corner of the first lap and had to watch the whole field pass him by, so he did very well to bring that car home in 6th place. And this is surely one of the most beautiful pre-war sports cars. It came in 14th, driven by David Cook. Alfa Romeo 8C Monza, 1934. A thing just of sheer beauty in my eyes, and so distinctive in that two-tone blue paintwork. Jumping now to a post-war car, I think we've seen this car in one of my earlier videos at Snetterton, and this is a Turner Arden. Now, when you think of Turners, you usually think of very small capacity cars, but this is a 1951 car, which is one of Jack Turner's very early products. The Arden V8 is basically a Ford flathead V8 with an overhead conversion, and the body is completely new, and it's been under a 10-year restoration. And I think it's a fascinating thing, and it's always really interesting to see something different and new. This is another car that we've seen before in the Snetterton video. It is, of course, the Lister Chevrolet, driven by Stuart Morley and Hudson. And what a beast it is. Always does very well. And then, of course, the beautiful Cobra. Mike Brewer from the successful Discovery show Wheeler Dealers was live on stage, and it was just an example of all the sideshows and all the other activities that were going on apart from the racing. As you would expect, there were many restoration companies displaying their wares, and JD Classics was one such company, and they had 2 beautiful Jaguars on display up for sale. This XK 120 fixed head coupe, absolutely spotless, just back from the Mille Miglia. Then there is this XK120 Roadster, which, as my father's restoring one at this very moment, I was really quite interested in. Now, to me, the Maserati 250F is almost the definitive Grand Prix car. Made famous, of course, by Fangio, just a thing of sheer beauty. These Maseratis were looked after by Steve Hart, who, interestingly enough, is just around the corner from me in Norfolk, but beautifully prepared. And these things are just wonderful to look at, even before they start racing on the circuit. Of course, the roll bars, to me, spoil the incredible lines, but I understand that because of the safety concerns. But look at those rivets at the back and that enormous exhaust. Wings on the front to stop the rain splashing up into the driver's face, especially whilst cornering. And these two Coopers, rear-engined, of course, a development, a much younger car than 250F, back to the Connaught B-type with an Alta engine. And this is the HGPCA pit. This is Andrew Beaumont's Lotus 18 in the BRP colours. And you can see number 27 there in the background, just leaving the assembly area. That's Tony Wood in the Tech-Mech, Maserati Tech-Mech, which was the last development of the Maserati 250F. The older version there, number 34, so beautiful. Indianapolis 500 car there, which is, of course, another very large front-engine car, which should really do quite well on a fast circuit like Silverstone. And the number 4, the Ferrari 2416, the last front-engine Ferrari Grand Prix car. Such a wonderful machine, as is that Scarab, which we just saw leaving shot there. Andrew Haddon driving Julian Bronson's Scarab, the Scarab being an American car, and does very well in historic racing now, even though in period it really did not do very well. So out on circuit, of course, it's no surprise that the rear-engine cars are up at the front, but look at that, the Indianapolis 500 car and the Scarab competing there, and they must be having a lot of fun. Will Nuttall, son of Ian Nuttall, who's quite famous around the paddock for prepping Bristol engine cars, he had it all his way up at the front. Incredibly quick driver. And this time driving a Cooper T53. Then it was a turn for the International Trophy for Classic GT cars. Again, this is a Prix 66 grid. So you've got Cobras and a TVR Griffith there with the 4.7 litre engine and such a short wheelbase car, which always makes those cars very exciting. This grid was the biggest grid of the weekend. There were 65 cars, which is a monstrous number of cars to get on the grid. But it just proves how popular this period of racing is. The Lotus Elans, of course, only 1600cc twin-cam engine. They're going to be outgunned by the big 4.7 litre V8s of the TVRs and the pole-sitting Daytona Cobra of Julian Thomas and Callum Lockie. And I think we've even got a Reliant Sabre there, which it's quite a rarity to see in a grid like this. And of course, Porsche 911s. And unsurprisingly, the two V8-powered TVR Griffiths are up at the front of Davison and Whittaker. Whittaker's in the blue car. He always goes very quickly. And number 43, that's the Marcos 1800 GT. And it looks like the Marcos has got the better line through the corner and takes the place away from the Aston. The Sunbeam Tiger there, number 81, that's a Le Mans car. There were only ever 3 of those cars built, and one of them is here today racing. The 55 E-Type coming in for a driver change. I think that will be Jason Minshaw getting into that car. That was a car that went really well at Donington and Goodwood earlier in the year. It was a 50-minute race, the longest race of the meeting, and so there were mostly 2 drivers for the cars. And don't those TVRs look fantastic? 3 running line astern. And there goes the winning car, which was actually the pole-sitting car, the Shelby Daytona Cobra of Callum Lockie and Julian Thomas. The 40th anniversary of Group C racing was celebrated as well at the Classic. The first Group C race was in 1982 at Silverstone, so it was quite appropriate that they gathered together a fantastic collection of these really impressive monsters, and you can see the Porsches there at the front. And as I've mentioned before, I think it was at the Donington Festival, it's a struggle to get Group C cars together, and there's Derek Bell, probably the most famous of all the Group C drivers of that sort of 80s period. Probably the largest number of Group C cars I've ever seen at Silverstone, but they were just doing a demonstration, and that led into the Masters endurance races. They are so fascinating to watch and so quick, and the Le Mans cars, the enclosed cockpit cars, just look otherworldly. That's a fantastic looking machine. That's the Lola Aston Martin DBR1-2. That's a 2009 car, and it has a 6-litre engine in it. Some people may think that these cars are too young to be part of a historic race meeting, but you can't help but be impressed by them. Split into classes. As you can see, there's a Ferrari GT car there going through. So it's a complete mixed bag. And these cars really do bring a flavour of the contemporary Le Mans race to Silverstone. What a fantastic looking Aston Martin that is. And just look at the sheer speed in comparison to the earlier sort of 60s GT cars we were watching. The speed that they're taking through these corners and the way that they just stick to the track is mightily impressive. Again, just wandering around the paddock, you see some fantastic machines. Here's Chris Jolly's Aston Martin DB2, an early 50s car. I think it's probably a 52. I didn't actually see it racing, but a wonderful thing. We were just there for the Saturday. Of course, there's racing throughout the weekend. The Sunday, these cars would be out again. So maintenance going on there, pretty much a family affair. So the Yokohama Trophy for Masters Sports Car Legends was the last race of the day, and basically this was a race between Lolas and Chevrons, the Lola T70s and the smaller engined Lola T212s, and the Chevron B16s, the Chevron B8s, and of course the Chevron B19s, which only have an 1800cc engine compared to the big Lola T70s, which are probably running a sort of Chevrolet 5-litre engines, and 1 or 2 GT40s in there, and young Alex Brundle driving number 23, a white Lola T70. He's really getting into historic racing these days. There's the big Chevrolet Corvette of 7 litres that you've just seen go through. We saw that at Brands Hatch in an earlier video in the year, and it's really, really ground rumbling stuff. That is the number 23 Lola T70 of Alex Brundle, and he took that car into second and was running really well until the last laps of the race, when oil smoke started to appear at the back and he had to retire the car. Again, 2 great Lola T70s battling it out there. And an interloper, really. That's a McLaren, early McLaren M1B of John Spears and Ollie Hancock, brother of Sam Hancock. And the Chevron B8 with the BMW 2-litre engine and the familiar colours there of Julian Thomas and Callum Lockie. And that is Tom Bradshaw, and this is actually at the end of the race. And although Tom has had to retire the car, he looks very happy because he has actually just won the race. On the last half of the last lap, he had a puncture in the front left. You can see him looking at it there, and he had to nurse that car home. If Alex Brundle had been still running, he would have no doubt overtook him. So that was the end of a great day's racing at the Classic. The music went on into the evening, which is always a big part of the Classic, and it's one of the reasons why the tickets are priced as they are, because you do get a concert in there as well. And the racing itself covers a far more recent period than, say, the Goodwood Revival, and that's not to everybody's taste. But it was fantastically competitive and real edge-of-the-seat stuff with some of those races. So another fantastic meeting, and hopefully there'll be more to come next year.